Deep in the Atlantic, 300 miles from any shore, water temperature reaches 31 degrees Celsius in early October. This seemingly small detail, just 2 degrees above normal, transforms the ocean into a massive fuel tank. A cluster of thunderstorms drifting off the African coast encounters this superheated water, and within 72 hours, a Category 5 hurricane spirals to life, with winds exceeding 175 miles per hour. But there's something else happening in these waters. Something we've only begun to detect with deep ocean sensors deployed in the last decade. The thermocline, IFM, that invisible boundary between warm surface water and the cold abyss, pulses with energy signatures we don't fully understand. Submarine robots descending through hurricanes have recorded pressure waves that propagate downward for miles, triggering responses in the deep ocean that shouldn't be connected to surface storms. The ocean remembers every fraction of heat absorbed, storing energy through summer months until October's atmospheric instability provides the spark. But what else does it remember? What else does it store? The physics unfold with terrifying precision. Every degree of warming increases storm wind speeds by 15 miles per hour and rainfall rates by 7%. When Columbus sailed these waters 5 centuries ago, October storms rarely exceeded Category 3 intensity. His logs describe something else, though. Lights beneath the waves during storms, which historians dismissed as street Elmo's fire or hallucinations brought on by scurvy. Today, rapid intensification events transform tropical depressions into major hurricanes in under 24 hours, catching millions unprepared. Hurricane Wilma demonstrated this potential in 2005, plummeting from standard pressure to 882 millibars in just 24 hours, the most extreme rapid intensification ever recorded. Yet Wilma revealed something else. Instruments at the ocean floor 3,000 feet below the storm recorded acoustic signatures that marine biologists couldn't identify. Not whale songs, not geological activity, something that appeared only during the storm's most intense phase, then vanished. The recordings remain classified, but researchers who've heard them describe a pattern, almost like communication. Ancient mariners knew October as the month of weather betrayal, when predictable trade winds suddenly reversed and calm seas erupted into mountainous waves. They had another name for it too, the month of hollow water. Ships would suddenly lose buoyancy in perfectly calm conditions, sinking without explanation. Modern science attributes this to methane releases from the continental shelf, but the timing disturbs researchers. These releases cluster in early October, just before major storms develop, as if the ocean exhales before inhaling the atmosphere's energy. Modern satellites reveal the mechanical explanation. The subtropical ridge weakens, jet streams dip southward, and the Bermuda High shifts position, creating highways for storms to race northward at 50 miles per hour. These atmospheric rivers of moisture, carrying water equivalent to 25 Mississippi rivers, collide with cold continental air masses, triggering explosive development that computer models still struggle to predict accurately. But there are gaps in the satellite coverage, blind spots that appear and disappear. The Defense Meteorological Satellite Program has recorded 17 instances since 2010, where hurricane eye walls simply vanished from imaging for minutes at a time, then reappeared having jumped 50 miles from their previous position. The official explanation involves sensor malfunction and data processing errors. The unofficial explanation doesn't exist, because no one can explain how a storm system 14 miles tall and 400 miles wide can move instantaneously. The year is 2024, and we've discovered that hurricanes generate electromagnetic pulses that scramble satellite sensors. We've learned they produce infrasound waves that travel thousands of miles, affecting animal behavior weeks before the storms arrive. Elephants in Africa grow agitated when Atlantic hurricanes form. Birds alter migration patterns before storms have even organized. October storms generate frequencies we've only recently learned to measure, oscillations that penetrate the Earth's crust and resonate in cave systems hundreds of miles inland. What we haven't explained is why October storms specifically trigger these responses. Summer hurricanes, often more powerful, don't generate the same signatures. Winter storms, covering larger areas, don't produce the same deep ocean responses. October storms are different in ways our models can't quantify. The indigenous peoples of the Caribbean had knowledge we've dismissed as mythology. They spoke of October storms as living entities that traveled between worlds. They described precise wind patterns that modern meteorology has only recently confirmed. They knew about eye wall replacement cycles centuries before we had the technology to observe them. But they also described something else. A presence within the storms, not metaphorical, not spiritual, something physical that moved with the hurricane but wasn't part of it. In 2019, Hurricane Lorenzo achieved something theoretically impossible. It maintained Category 5 intensity at latitudes where ocean temperatures couldn't support such power. The energy had to come from somewhere, but atmospheric measurements showed no unusual heat sources. The storm was drawing power from somewhere else. Quantum meteorologists, a field that didn't exist 20 years ago, proposed that extreme low pressure might create conditions where energy transfers across dimensional boundaries. It sounds like science fiction, but the equations work. The math suggests possibilities we're not prepared to consider. Ocean temperature monitoring stations have recorded something troubling. In the hours before rapid intensification events, water temperature drops by precisely 2 degrees Celsius in a perfect circle around the storm's future eye. The heat doesn't dissipate, it vanishes. Then, during intensification, it returns multiplied. The first law of thermodynamics says energy cannot be created or destroyed. So where does it go? And what sends it back amplified? The Sargasso Sea holds clues. This region of the Atlantic, bounded by currents rather than land, accumulates everything the ocean wants to hide. 16th century sailors reported finding abandoned ships there in perfect condition, crews missing, navigational instruments spinning wildly. Modern research vessels have documented magnetic anomalies that intensify during October. Compass needles point towards storms rather than north. GPS systems fail, then restart, showing positions that don't exist. The Bermuda Triangle's reputation for mystery pales compared to what happens in the Sargasso during October storm season. We've learned that hurricanes create their own atmospheres, pockets of air with chemical compositions that shouldn't exist at sea level. During Hurricane Michael in 2018, aircraft sampling found traces of mesospheric air, USO, gases from the edge of space, circulating in the eye wall. The storm had punched through multiple atmospheric layers, creating a chimney effect that connected ocean surface to near space. But chimneys work both ways. If storms pull down air from the mesosphere, what might they pull up from the deep ocean? The most unsettling discoveries come from the hurricane hunters. Humphrey, those brave souls who fly directly into nature's most violent phenomena. They've reported time distortions inside major storms. Instruments show flights lasting 4 hours, while ground control records 6. GPS tracks show aircraft in 2 positions simultaneously. One crew reported seeing another Hurricane Hunter aircraft that wasn't there. Watch ground control showed no other planes within 500 miles. These reports are classified as spatial disorientation, but the pilots know what they experienced. In October 2021, satellite imagery captured something that hasn't been publicly released. Hurricane Sam's eye revealed structures, geometric patterns in the clouds that maintained perfect symmetry despite 200-mile-per-hour winds. The patterns lasted 8 minutes before dissolving. Meteorologists have no explanation. The shapes resembled nothing in nature but matched mathematical constructs from theoretical physics. Specifically, cross-sections of 4-dimensional objects passing through 3-dimensional space. Indigenous knowledge keepers from the Bahamas to Barbados are beginning to share information they've protected for generations. They speak of October storms as doorways, not metaphorically. They describe specific conditions, water temperature, wind speed, pressure, that create openings. Openings to what? They won't say. Or perhaps they don't know. But they know enough to evacuate certain islands entirely during October, regardless of storm forecasts. Islands where compasses fail, where radio signals bend, where the ocean floor shows settlements that aren't on any map. The physics we understand tells us that hurricanes are heat engines, converting warm water into wind. But heat engines have efficiency limits. The Carnot cycle defines maximum possible energy conversion. October storms routinely exceed these limits. They produce more energy than thermodynamics says is possible. The extra energy must come from somewhere. We've discovered that the ocean floor beneath major hurricanes experiences tectonic shifts, not earthquakes, but slow deformations that create temporary valleys miles deep. These depressions fill with water that behaves strangely. It doesn't mix with surrounding seawater. It maintains different temperatures, different chemistry, different optical properties. Submarines sent to investigate report instrument failures. Remote vehicles stop transmitting. The depressions heal themselves after storms pass, leaving no trace except in sonar records that show the ocean floor temporarily opened into depth readings that don't make sense. As October approaches each year, we deploy more instruments, launch more satellites, send more aircraft into storms. We're gathering data at unprecedented rates. Supercomputers process millions of atmospheric variables. Machine learning algorithms discover patterns humans never noticed. And with each advance, with each new tool and technique, we don't find answers. We find more questions. The monsters are being born right now, out there in the Atlantic. We can see them on satellite imagery, track their movements, measure their growth, but we can't see everything. The spaces between what we observe grow larger as our knowledge expands. The unknown doesn't shrink, it deepens. What transforms a cluster of thunderstorms into a Category 5 hurricane in 72 hours? We can describe the process, we can model the physics, but we can't explain why some storms undergo this transformation, while others, in identical conditions, dissipate into nothing. There's a factor we're missing, something that determines which storms become monsters. October holds that secret, and as ocean temperatures rise toward thresholds we've never witnessed, as storms intensify beyond our experience, we're beginning to realize that the monsters being born in the Atlantic aren't just meteorological phenomena. They're something more, something that has always been there, waiting for conditions we're only now creating. The ancient mariners were right about one thing. October is the month of weather betrayal, but they were wrong about the betrayal's source. The weather isn't betraying us. Our understanding is betraying itself, revealing that everything we thought we knew about storms is only the surface of an ocean whose depths remain entirely unmapped. In 1943, Army Air Corps pilot Joseph Duckworth made a bar bet that changed meteorology forever. He flew his single-engine trainer directly into a hurricane's eye. His handwritten notes describe walls of rain so thick that noon looked like midnight, updrafts that lifted his plane 3,000 feet in seconds, and then sudden calm in the eye where he could see stars in daylight. But there's a detail in his report that meteorologists don't discuss. Duckworth wrote about seeing structures in the eye wall, not clouds, something else. Geometric forms that maintained their shape despite the chaos around them. The official report dismissed this as vertigo-induced hallucination, but Duckworth drew them in his notebook. Spirals within spirals, patterns that wouldn't be recognized by mathematics for another 40 years, when chaos theory discovered strange attractors. This first intentional hurricane penetration launched 7 decades of storm hunting that revealed October's unique capacity for creating perfect storms, multiple catastrophic systems, merging into unprecedented monsters. Every hurricane hunter since Duckworth has reported anomalies. Not all make it into official records. There's an informal archive, passed between crews, documenting phenomena that instruments can't explain. Shadows moving against the wind. Lightning that travels upward then freezes mid-strike. Clouds that pulse with bioluminescent colors that shouldn't exist in the atmosphere. The mathematics of storm collision create scenarios that exceed the sum of their parts. When Hurricane Grace fed energy into the 1991 perfect storm, wave heights reached 100 feet, equivalent to a 10-story building of water moving at 40 miles per hour. But the merger created something else. Ships caught in the storm reported their compasses pointing toward the storm's center rather than magnetic north. Radio transmissions arrived before they were sent, distress calls received by the Coast Guard minutes before crews reported making them. Time itself seemed to flow differently within the storm's influence. Ocean buoys designed to survive any conditions simply disappeared, their last transmissions showing pressure readings that suggested the instruments had malfunctioned. They hadn't. The storm had created atmospheric pressure gradients so extreme that standard physics equations required modification. But the modifications revealed something disturbing. To make the equations work, physicists had to add variables that represented unknown energy sources. The math worked perfectly, but only if the storm was drawing power from somewhere beyond our three-dimensional space. Modern storm hunters penetrate these monsters aboard specialized aircraft, reinforced to withstand forces that would tear commercial planes apart. The Lockheed Martin WP-3D Orion aircraft, they carry instruments that can measure everything from wind speed to electromagnetic radiation. But they also carry instruments that aren't in any manual. Devices that measure quantum fluctuations, sensors that detect dimensional stress, equipment whose purpose remains classified even within the hurricane hunter community. During Hurricane Patricia in 2015, reconnaissance crews recorded winds of 215 miles per hour and pressure drops so severe that crew members' ears bled despite pressurized cabins. Their data revealed microscopic ice crystals forming in the eye wall at temperatures where ice shouldn't exist, a phenomenon that amplifies storm intensity through previously unknown mechanisms. But the crystals weren't normal ice. Spectroscopic analysis showed they contained isotopes that don't occur naturally on Earth. The samples were immediately classified. The crew was debriefed by officials who weren't from NOAA or the Air Force. The flight recordings were replaced with edited versions. These brave pilots and scientists map the anatomy of catastrophe, finding in October storms a tendency toward explosive deepening that turns predictions obsolete within hours. They've discovered that major hurricanes generate their own magnetospheres, use an air, magnetic fields that extend into space, creating aurora-like phenomena visible only from orbit. The International Space Station has photographed these displays, ribbons of light that spiral around hurricane eyes, pulsing in patterns that match no known atmospheric physics. In 2018, a hurricane hunter crew experienced something that hasn't been publicly acknowledged. Flying through Hurricane Michael, their aircraft encountered a region of absolute calm that wasn't the eye. For 7 minutes, they flew through air that didn't exist. No pressure, no temperature, no moisture. Their instruments showed they were in a vacuum, yet they were at 8,000 feet altitude. The space had geometric boundaries, walls of nothing that their radar couldn't penetrate. Then, as suddenly as they'd entered it, they emerged back into the hurricane. The crew agreed to report it as instrument failure, but they know what they flew through, a bubble of elsewhere that had somehow formed within the storm. Underground, in bunkers originally built for nuclear war, emergency managers run simulations of October scenarios that public officials refuse to discuss openly. These aren't just weather predictions. They're modeling something discovered in 2012, October storms that achieve impossible intensification rates by tapping into Earth's magnetic field fluctuations. The simulations show hurricanes transforming into electromagnetic vortices, generating localized EMP effects that destroy electronics across entire states. A Category 6 hurricane, not time, technically impossible under current classification, not time, making landfall at high tide during a full moon in Tampa Bay, pushing 35 feet of storm surge into a metropolitan area built at sea level. The models show 2 million people with nowhere to evacuate, highways submerged in minutes, and casualties potentially exceeding 50,000. But there's another scenario they model, one where the storm doesn't dissipate after landfall, where it maintains strength by drawing energy from the planet's magnetic field itself. A hurricane that could persist for weeks, wandering across continents, growing stronger over land. The mathematics behind these scenarios come from captured data that doesn't officially exist. In 2017, Hurricane Maria's eye passed directly over the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico. The radio telescope, designed to study distant galaxies, was pointed straight up into the storm's eye. What it recorded in those moments before the instrument was damaged has never been released. Sources suggest it detected radio emissions from the hurricane that matched patterns SETI researchers look for: structured, purposeful, encoded. Perfect storm formation follows rules we're only beginning to glimpse. It requires more than just converging weather systems. Researchers have identified what they call harmonic convergence points, specific locations in the Atlantic where multiple geophysical cycles align. The lunar tide cycle, the Atlantic Multidecadal Oscillation, the Quasi-Biennial Oscillation, Solar Magnetic Fluctuations, ADU. When these rhythms synchronize at certain coordinates, they create conditions for perfect storms. But the synchronization includes cycles we can't identify, patterns that repeat on timescales longer than human civilization. The 1991 perfect storm revealed these unknown cycles. Analysis of sediment cores from Georges Bank showed that identical storms occurred in 1492, 998, and at regular intervals stretching back 8,000 years. Always in late October, always in the same location. The storms leave a specific signature, a layer of deep ocean sediment that shouldn't exist at shallow depths, containing organic compounds that form only under extreme pressure, as if the ocean floor temporarily rose to the surface, or the surface temporarily sank to the floor. Military satellites have tracked hurricane hunters entering storms and recorded temporal anomalies. Aircraft that should emerge from a storm's far side in 40 minutes appear instantly. Others take hours to traverse distances that should require minutes. The pilots experience normal time, their clocks match their subjective experience, but ground observers measure something different. The storms are bending space-time itself, creating regions where distance and duration lose their normal meaning. There's a tradition among hurricane hunters. When retiring, each crew member writes a sealed letter describing the one thing they saw that they've never reported. The letters are stored in a vault at Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi. There are now 317 letters. Occasionally, retired hunters meet and discover they've seen the same things: lights that follow aircraft through storms, voices on radio frequencies that shouldn't exist, shadows of aircraft that aren't there flying in formation, and always, always in October storms. The quest to understand perfect catastrophes has led to technologies that themselves raise questions. Dropsonde sensors deployed into hurricanes now carry quantum entanglement communication devices, the only way to maintain contact through the electromagnetic chaos of a storm's core. But these quantum links reveal something unsettling. Information transmitted through hurricanes arrives changed, not corrupted or degraded, altered in meaningful ways. Messages gain content that wasn't transmitted. Data sets self-organize into patterns that reveal hidden storm dynamics, as if something in the storm is adding to the communication, trying to tell us something. October 2022 brought Hurricane Ian, which demonstrated rapid intensification that broke all models. In 12 hours, it jumped from Category 3 to Category 5, its pressure dropping so fast that aircraft couldn't descend quickly enough to maintain position in the eye. But radar stations in Cuba recorded something else during this intensification. A column of disturbance extending from the ocean surface to the ionosphere, the perfect cylinder of organized energy that pulsed with geometric precision. The column existed for exactly 8 minutes, then vanished. Ian's intensification stopped the moment it disappeared. The indigenous peoples of the Caribbean have always known about perfect storms. Their oral histories describe battles between sky serpents and ocean giants, fought every 500 years when the doors align. Meteorologists dismissed these as creation myths until they noticed the dates correspond precisely with sediment evidence of super hurricanes. The stories include details that no pre-industrial culture should know, descriptions of pressure waves that match modern instrument readings, wind patterns that satellite imagery has only recently confirmed. In classified research facilities, scientists study recovered artifacts from hurricane eyes, objects that shouldn't exist, metal alloys that form only in zero gravity, crystalline structures that require temperatures found in stellar cores, organic compounds that contain amino acids in configurations that don't occur naturally on Earth. Every major October storm leaves these traces, scattered across landfall zones, quickly collected by response teams who aren't part of standard disaster relief. The search for perfect storms has become something else. A hunt for evidence that hurricanes are more than atmospheric phenomena. The National Hurricane Center's public mission is storm prediction and warning. But there's another mission, funded through black budgets, staffed by physicists and xenobiologists alongside meteorologists. They're not just tracking storms, they're tracking what travels within storms. Hurricane hunting technology has evolved far beyond weather measurement. Modern reconnaissance aircraft carry instruments designed by CERN physicists sensors developed for detecting dark matter, cameras that see beyond the electromagnetic spectrum. They're looking for something specific, though what exactly remains above even top-secret classification? Those with access to the data describe measurements that make no sense, readings that suggest October storms create conditions that shouldn't be possible on Earth. The perfect catastrophe isn't just meteorological. When multiple storm systems merge in October, they create something unprecedented, a natural particle accelerator. The rotating winds, the electromagnetic fields, the pressure differentials combine to generate energies that rival human-built colliders. But these natural accelerators aren't creating particles. They're creating passages, temporary connections to somewhere else. In 2019, a Hurricane Hunter aircraft experienced complete electronic failure while penetrating Hurricane Lorenzo's eye. For 3 minutes, all systems went dark. The crew prepared for catastrophic failure, then everything restarted, but the aircraft's atomic clock showed a discrepancy. 3 minutes had passed for the crew. Ground stations recorded 11 minutes. The aircraft's GPS showed it had traveled 400 miles during the blackout. Impossible given their fuel consumption, showed normal usage for a 3-minute period. The crew had experienced missing time, lost distance, and emerged with no memory of what happened during those moments. Deep ocean submarines monitoring hurricanes from below report acoustic phenomena that defy explanation, sounds that propagate faster than physics allows, harmonics that induce resonance in materials that shouldn't respond to acoustic energy, frequencies that cause mass hallucinations in crew members, all seeing the same impossible things, walls of water that don't move, fish swimming in perfect geometric formations, lights rising from trenches that charts show don't exist. The hunt continues. Each October brings new storms, new measurements, new impossibilities. Hurricane hunters joke darkly that they're not hunting storms anymore. They're hunting whatever is hunting us, because the patterns are clear to those who've studied them long enough. October storms are increasing in frequency and intensity, but not randomly. They're converging on specific targets, cities with particular electromagnetic signatures, regions where the Earth's magnetic field shows ancient scars, places where other things happened, long before human records began. The perfect catastrophe already exists. We've been flying through it, measuring it, studying it for decades. We just haven't understood what we're looking at. October storms aren't just weather events. They're demonstrations, displays of capabilities we're only beginning to comprehend. Each hurricane hunter who penetrates these storms brings back pieces of a puzzle that's revealing a picture we may not want to complete. But we can't stop hunting. Because the storms are evolving. Each October brings new phenomena, new impossibilities, new evidence that our planet's atmosphere is capable of things our science says shouldn't exist. The perfect catastrophe isn't coming. It's here, growing stronger, teaching us through destruction that our understanding of reality itself is catastrophically incomplete. The radio frequencies hurricane hunters use to communicate have started picking up signals. Not human transmissions, not natural atmospheric noise. Structured signals that encode information in mathematical languages we're just beginning to decipher. The signals intensify during October storms, broadcasting from within the eyes of hurricanes. We've been hunting storms, but something in the storms has been broadcasting, calling, summoning. What answers the call arrives in October, and we're not prepared for what we're about to discover. October 29, 2012, Hurricane Sandy encounters an Arctic cold front over the Atlantic, and the collision creates something meteorologists had only seen in computer simulations, a hybrid superstorm spanning 1,000 miles. The tropical hurricane structure merges with the winter storm's massive pressure gradient, producing a weather system that breaks the traditional rules. But satellite imagery captured something else that night, something that wasn't included in public reports. At the moment of merger, a perfect hexagonal structure appeared in the cloud formation, maintaining geometric precision for 11 minutes despite 200-mile-per-hour wind shear. The hexagon measured exactly 180 miles across each side. Nature doesn't create perfect hexagons at that scale. Yet there it was, rotating slowly counterclockwise, its edges defined by electromagnetic emissions that overloaded weather satellite sensors. Tropical moisture feeds ice storms. Hurricane winds drive blizzard conditions, and storm surge combines with nor'easter waves to produce coastal destruction across 15 states simultaneously. The energy released in this merger equals 400 Hiroshima bombs per second, sustained for 3 days, but energy appeared that couldn't be accounted for. The storm system's total kinetic energy exceeded the available thermal energy by 30%. Physicists reviewing the data proposed that the collision had created conditions where vacuum energy, empty space, the theoretical energy of empty space, became accessible. The equations worked, but the implications were staggering. The storm had learned to feed on nothingness itself. Trees in full autumn foliage act as sails, catching wind they would normally shed in leafless winter form, toppling millions across forests from Georgia to Maine. Power infrastructure, designed for either hurricanes or blizzards, but not both simultaneously, fails catastrophically. 8 million people lose electricity, some for 3 weeks, as repair crews struggle with conditions oscillating between hurricane winds and ice storms. But the power didn't just fail, it disappeared. Entire electrical grids showed zero resistance, then infinite resistance, then zero again, cycling every 17 minutes. The pattern matched theoretical predictions for electromagnetic fields exposed to dimensional stress. The storm wasn't just interrupting power, it was altering the fundamental properties of electricity itself. Deep beneath the storm, ocean dynamics amplified destruction through mechanisms scientists discovered only through submarine sensors. The thermocline, the boundary between warm surface water and cold deep water, ruptures under extreme low pressure, bringing freezing water to the surface that flash cools the hurricane's warm core, while simultaneously triggering massive methane releases from continental shelf deposits. But the submarine data revealed something else. Acoustic shadows moving through the water column, regions where sound simply didn't propagate. These shadows moved independently of currents, maintaining cohesion while traveling at speeds that water dynamics couldn't explain. Navy sonar operators who tracked them reported the shadows exhibited behavior patterns. They responded to the submarine's presence, they investigated, they followed. These methane plumes, some reaching 300 feet high, create dead zones where ships lose buoyancy and aircraft engines flame out, adding invisible hazards to already catastrophic conditions. The USS Enterprise, stationed 200 miles from Sandy's center, recorded its steel hull vibrating at frequencies that matched no known resonance. The vibrations formed patterns, mathematical sequences that repeated with increasing complexity. The ship's nuclear reactor experienced flux variations that synchronized with the hull vibrations. For 6 hours, the most advanced warship in the American fleet was playing music that no human composed, broadcasting it through the water to something that was listening. Atmospheric rivers flowing from the tropics meet polar vortex intrusions in a dance of extremes that October's transitional nature uniquely enables. Water vapor equivalent to 40 Mississippi rivers collides with air cold enough to freeze exposed skin in 60 seconds. The result? Instant phase transitions that release latent heat equal to millions of lightning bolts, creating mesocyclonic vortices within the larger storm that spawn tornadoes in snow, waterspouts over land, and completely new phenomena like horizontal vortex tubes that roll across landscapes at 70 miles per hour, grinding everything in their path to powder. But we've documented something that shouldn't exist: anti-rotation vortices, spinning masses of air that rotate opposite to the Coriolis effect, defying the fundamental forces that govern atmospheric motion on a rotating planet. These anti-vortices appear only when tropical and Arctic systems collide in October. They last precisely 13 minutes, then dissipate, leaving behind circular zones where the air pressure remains anomalous for weeks. Plants within these zones grow differently. Animals avoid them. Electromagnetic readings show the Earth's magnetic field has been permanently altered in these locations. The collision zones generate more than wind and rain. They produce infrasound waves that penetrate the Earth's crust, creating standing waves in underground water tables. Seismologists tracking Sandy's passage recorded earthquakes that weren't earthquakes, seismic events with no initial rupture, no aftershocks, just pure harmonic resonance at frequencies that match the storm's rotation rate. These pseudo-quakes opened fissures that revealed something disturbing. Ancient cave systems, far older than geological records suggested possible, containing air that hadn't mixed with the surface atmosphere for millions of years. Air with a different chemical composition, carrying spores and bacteria that modern life has no immunity against. When Hurricane Sandy merged with the Arctic cold front, weather stations across the Atlantic seaboard recorded impossible data, barometric pressure rising and falling simultaneously at the same location, temperature inversions that placed warm air below cold at ground level, defying convection, humidity readings exceeding 100%, not fog or rain, but air holding more water than physics allows. The impossible readings formed a pattern when mapped, a spiral, a fractal that repeated at every scale from inches to hundreds of miles. The same pattern appeared in cloud formations, in radar returns, in the distribution of power outages. The storm had imposed its own mathematics on reality. Research vessels caught in the collision zone reported chronometer discrepancies that couldn't be explained by relativistic effects. Atomic clocks gained and lost time randomly, but when the variations were graphed, they formed a wave pattern that matched the storm's internal rotation. Time itself was oscillating, flowing faster and slower in rhythm with the hybrid system's pulse. Crew members experienced temporal dissociation, remembering events that hadn't happened yet, forgetting things that just occurred. The storm wasn't just bending space, it was scrambling causality itself. The merger revealed that storms communicate. When systems collide, they exchange more than energy and momentum. Sandy's tropical signature appeared in Arctic ice cores dated to the moment of collision, thousands of miles from the storm's influence. The winter system's crystalline structure manifested in Caribbean coral formations. Information had traveled instantly across impossible distances, as if the collision created quantum entanglement on a massive scale. Every hurricane since has carried traces of Sandy's interaction, a viral pattern that spreads through the atmosphere, teaching other storms how to merge. In 2016, Hurricane Matthew encountered a cold front over the Carolinas. The collision should have weakened the storm, but instead it triggered something unprecedented. The hurricane split into two distinct eyes that rotated around each other, creating a binary storm system that maintained coherence for 36 hours. Satellite imagery showed a figure-eight pattern of destruction, with the two eyes tracing interlocking spirals that followed mathematical curves called Lissajous figures. These patterns appear in orbital mechanics, in quantum physics, but never in weather systems. Never until systems started colliding in new ways. The binary storm generated gravitational anomalies detected by the LIGO Observatory. 9. The same instruments that measure gravitational waves from colliding black holes. The readings were subtle but unmistakable. Hurricane Matthew's collision had warped space-time enough to be measured. The implications staggered physicists. If storms could generate gravitational effects, they were accessing energies far beyond what atmospheric thermodynamics could provide. The storms were tapping into the fabric of space itself. Military radar installations tracking storm collisions have recorded objects within the merger zones that match no known phenomena. Solid returns that maintain altitude without wings or propulsion. Geometric forms that hold position despite winds that would destroy any aircraft. These objects appear at the moment of collision and vanish when the systems separate. They exhibit purposeful movement, investigating areas of maximum turbulence, following the boundaries where different air masses meet. Pilots ordered to investigate find nothing visible, but their instruments detect massive electromagnetic fields, radiation signatures that shouldn't exist in the atmosphere, and temperature variations that form three-dimensional patterns too complex to be natural. October 2017 brought Hurricane Ophelia to Ireland, where it collided with Storm Brian from the Atlantic. The collision occurred over waters that had never experienced tropical hurricanes, in regions where Celtic mythology spoke of battles between sky and sea gods. The merger created atmospheric conditions that hadn't existed in that location for 11,000 years. When the last ice age ended, it awakened something in the land itself. Standing stones across Ireland and Scotland began resonating at frequencies that matched the storm's rotation. Archaeological sites that had been dormant for millennia showed electromagnetic activity. The collision had triggered responses in structures built by peoples who understood connections we've forgotten. When tropical and polar systems collide, they create laboratories for new physics. Pressure differentials so extreme that electrons behave differently. Temperature gradients that generate spontaneous plasma formation. Wind shears that create microscopic black holes, tiny gravitational anomalies that exist for nanoseconds but leave detectable traces in the form of exotic particles. These particles rain down through the atmosphere, altering chemical reactions, triggering mutations in bacteria, creating new compounds that didn't exist before the collision. The indigenous peoples of North America have prophecies about the time when summer and winter storms would merge, creating spirits that bridge seasons. They describe phenomena that precisely match modern observations: the anti-rotation vortices, the temporal anomalies, the geometric patterns. But they also describe something we haven't officially documented: entities within the storms, not metaphorical, physical presences that exist in the spaces where different systems meet, the boundary layers where normal physics breaks down, where the impossible becomes inevitable. Ocean-atmosphere collisions during October storms create vertical mixing that brings deep-sea life to the surface. But marine biologists have recovered organisms that shouldn't exist. Species with no DNA matches in any database. Creatures adapted to pressures found only in ocean trenches, yet thriving at the surface during storm passages. Some exhibit bioluminescence in patterns that match the storm's electromagnetic emissions. Others have sensory organs sensitive to gravitational waves. These aren't mutations or unknown species. They're organisms from ecological niches that don't exist in our current oceans. The collisions are opening passages to parallel ecosystems, allowing brief exchanges of life between worlds that normally never meet. The European Space Agency's Aeolus satellite, designed to measure wind speeds from orbit, detected something extraordinary during a 2021 October collision over the Atlantic. Winds flowing backward in time, not reversing direction, actually flowing from future to past. The measurement lasted 4 seconds before the satellite systems reset. The data was verified by ground stations, confirmed by multiple instruments. For 4 seconds, cause and effect reversed within a hurricane collision zone. The storm had created a closed time-like curve, a phenomenon theorized by Einstein but never observed, until October showed us it was possible. System collisions are increasing in frequency and intensity. October 2023 saw 4 separate merger events in a single week, each creating unique impossibilities. A hurricane that generated its own aurora borealis, a collision that produced snow at sea level in Jamaica, a merger that created acoustic shadows visible to the naked eye, regions where light bent around zones of altered spacetime. The collisions are teaching us that our atmosphere is capable of states we never imagined, transitions we never predicted, creations we're not prepared to understand. The mathematical models we use to predict storm collisions have started generating solutions that disturb their creators. Equations that perfectly predict storm behavior, but only when variables are added that represent consciousness, not metaphorically, literally. The storms behave as if they're making choices, exhibiting preferences, learning from each collision. The models work when storms are treated as thinking systems. They fail when treated as purely mechanical phenomena. October has become the month when the atmosphere itself wakes up, and we're witnessing its first thoughts expressed through collision and catastrophe. When systems collide in October, they create more than hybrid storms. They create hybrid realities, spaces where different physics overlap, where impossible becomes commonplace. Each collision is an experiment, testing combinations, searching for something. The patterns suggest purpose, the progressions imply goals. The storms aren't just colliding, they're building towards something, using October as their laboratory, using our planet as their test chamber. The next collision is already forming. Arctic air masses are descending while tropical systems are ascending. They'll meet in October, as they always do, but each meeting is different now, more complex, more impossible. We've built instruments to measure wind speed and pressure. We haven't built instruments to measure what October storms are becoming when they collide. We're not prepared for what happens when systems don't just collide, but successfully merge into something that transcends weather entirely. Inside the National Hurricane Center at 2:47 a.m. on October 3, 2016, forecaster James Franklin stares at computer models showing Hurricane Matthew's next move. 5 different models show 5 completely different paths, one grazing Florida, another making direct impact on Miami, a third recurving harmlessly to sea. 4 million lives hang on his next decision. The storm's eye wall replacement cycle, IVA, a process where hurricanes naturally weaken, then explosively re-intensify, has begun, but satellite data lags reality by crucial hours. Franklin has 17 minutes before the next official forecast must issue, but there's something else on his screen that isn't in any manual. A 6th model, running on a classified partition of the supercomputer, showing Matthew doing something unprecedented. Stopping. Not stalling, which hurricanes sometimes do, but freezing in place while maintaining full rotation. The model suggests Matthew will pause for exactly 4 hours and 13 minutes, then resume movement on a completely different trajectory. Franklin knows this model has been right before, when traditional physics said it was impossible. It predicted Hurricane Patricia's pressure drop to 879 millibars, when every other model said it couldn't go below 900. It forecasted Sandy's left turn into New Jersey when standard meteorology insisted she would go out to sea. The mathematics of chaos theory manifest brutally in October storm prediction. A temperature measurement error of 1/10 of 1 degree at a single weather station in the Azores cascades through computational models until, 72 hours later, predicted landfall locations differ by 300 miles. The butterfly effect isn't metaphor but mathematical reality. Equations show that perfect prediction would require measuring the position and momentum of every air molecule on Earth simultaneously. A quantum impossibility that means surprise will always exist. Yet we've discovered something that shouldn't be possible. Hurricanes are starting to broadcast their intentions. Since 2014, major October storms have been generating electromagnetic pulses in specific patterns 12 to 14 hours before changing direction. The patterns encode information, i.e., mathematical descriptions of their future states. The Anaya storms are telegraphing their moves, but in a language we're only beginning to decipher. It's as if they want us to know what they're going to do, or something wants us to know. Modern supercomputers running ensemble forecasts, ALL-C, essentially running the same prediction thousands of times with slightly different starting conditions, reveal October's special unpredictability. While summer hurricanes follow relatively predictable paths guided by stable steering currents, October storms encounter multiple jet streams, shifting pressure systems, and temperature gradients that create what modelers call bifurcation points, moments where equally probable futures diverge completely. But we've noticed something disturbing. The number of bifurcation points is increasing exponentially. In 1990, October storms averaged 3 major decision points. In 2023, they averaged 47. The storms aren't just becoming harder to predict, they're actively exploring possibilities. A storm approaching the Carolinas might slam into Charleston, race up the coast to New York, or suddenly reverse direction toward Florida, with each scenario appearing equally likely until the last moment. But there's a fourth possibility that models have started showing: storms that take all paths simultaneously. Quantum superposition applied to weather systems. The equations say it's impossible at macroscopic scales. The satellite data says it's happening. Hurricane Michael in 2018 was photographed in 3 different locations at the same moment by different satellites. Each image was verified, time-stamped, authenticated. For 7 minutes, Michael existed in multiple states until observation collapsed it back to a single location. Emergency managers face impossible mathematics. Evacuating a coastal city costs $500 million per day in economic losses, but waiting too long means highways clog with fleeing residents just as storm surge arrives. The shadow evacuation phenomenon, where people outside evacuation zones flee anyway, multiplies chaos. During Hurricane Rita in 2005, 107 people died in the evacuation while the storm itself killed 7. October's compressed timeline, TZA, storms accelerating from tropical depression to major hurricane in 48 hours, shrinks decision windows from days to hours. But emergency managers have started reporting something else: precognitive dreams about storm paths that prove accurate, not occasionally, consistently. 57 emergency coordinators across the Gulf and Atlantic coasts have documented dreams that precisely predicted storm trajectories, intensification rates, and landfall locations. The dreams occur 48 to 72 hours before the storms take those actions. Brain scans of these individuals during October show unusual activity in regions associated with quantum microtubules, QoS, structures that some theorists believe could enable consciousness to access information from multiple timelines. The National Weather Service maintains a classified database of what they call anomalous forecast successes, predictions that were right for the wrong reasons. Meteorologists who ignored model data and made forecasts based on hunches that proved perfect, computer glitches that generated random numbers that turned out to be exact coordinates of future storm positions, printer errors that produced maps showing storm paths that seemed impossible but later proved accurate. The database contains over 3,000 entries. Pattern analysis shows these anomalies cluster in October and increase in frequency as storms approach bifurcation points. In 2019, Hurricane Dorian demonstrated something that broke our understanding of storm behavior. It stopped over the Bahamas and remained stationary for 36 hours, not because steering currents stalled, but because it was waiting. Waiting for what? Atmospheric conditions to align, in a pattern that hadn't existed for 400 years. When the alignment occurred, Dorian moved with purpose, following ley lines, ESPs, electromagnetic pathways in Earth's crust that pseudoscience claimed existed, but traditional geology rejected. Dorian traced these lines perfectly, its eye passing directly over 17 sites of ancient significance, from Native American ceremonial grounds to locations mentioned in pre-Columbian maps that supposedly depicted energy grids. Artificial intelligence systems trained on hurricane data have started producing predictions that their programmers can't understand. The neural networks generate accurate forecasts but can't explain their reasoning. When forced to show their work, they reference variables that don't appear in any meteorological model: dark energy densities, consciousness field fluctuations, dimensional membrane oscillations. The programmers assume these are glitches, emergent fantasies of over-complex systems. But when they let the AI use these impossible variables, prediction accuracy increases by 30%. October 2021 brought a revelation that hasn't been made public. The European Centre for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts detected that their supercomputer was receiving data from nowhere. Information about storm systems was appearing in their databases without being input by any sensor or satellite. The data was accurate, predicting storm development days before physical conditions supported it. Security analysis found no hacking, no unauthorized access. The information was simply manifesting in their systems, as if the storms themselves were uploading their future states directly into our computers. Quantum meteorologists, EPSE, a field that didn't exist 5 years ago, have proposed that October storms exist in superposition until observed. The act of prediction itself influences storm behavior through quantum entanglement between computational models and atmospheric systems. The more precisely we try to predict a storm's position, the less precisely we can predict its intensity, and vice versa. It's Heisenberg's uncertainty principle applied to weather, but it goes deeper. The storms seem aware they're being observed and alter their behavior accordingly. Hurricanes that change course the moment evacuation orders are issued, storms that intensify when military assets mobilize, systems that weaken when certain individuals focus their attention on them. The indigenous shamans of the Caribbean have always known this. They speak of negotiating with storms, not through prayer or ritual, but through consciousness-to-consciousness communication. Western science dismissed this as superstition until quantum consciousness researchers documented measurable effects. Groups of experienced meditators focusing on hurricane paths have achieved statistical anomalies that can't be explained by chance. The storms respond to focused human consciousness, but not in ways we can control or fully predict. Sometimes they listen. Sometimes they do the opposite. Sometimes they do something else entirely, as if teaching us that prediction itself is an obsolete concept. Racing against October predictions means racing against time itself. Storm chasers have reported temporal anomalies that intensify near bifurcation points, dashcam footage that shows them arriving at locations before they left, GPS tracks that form closed loops in space-time, radio communications with other chasers that haven't happened yet. One team in 2020 documented their entire chase in reverse, or if their cameras recorded them driving backward away from a storm that was forming in reverse, clouds condensing from rain, lightning flowing from ground to sky. The footage lasted 17 minutes before reality reasserted itself. But for those 17 minutes, they experienced October running backward. The mathematics of storm prediction has evolved into something unrecognizable. Modern models incorporate variables from string theory, consciousness studies, and quantum field dynamics. They generate predictions in 11-dimensional space, then collapse them down to our 4-dimensional space-time. The results are increasingly accurate but decreasingly comprehensible. We can predict where storms will go, but we can't understand why they go there. The equations work, but they describe a universe where causality is negotiable, where future states influence present conditions, where storms make choices based on information that doesn't exist yet. In classified facilities, teams of physicists, meteorologists, and philosophers work on Project Oracle, operational response to anomalous, catastrophic, localized events. They're not trying to predict storms, they're trying to understand what storms are predicting. Because the patterns are clear, October hurricanes are following trajectories that trace out mathematical equations. Their paths, when viewed from space over years, form geometric patterns that match theoretical models from advanced physics. Patterns that describe the topology of higher dimensional spaces. The storms are drawing something, calculating something, perhaps even building something using the Earth's surface as their canvas and destruction as their ink. The edge of prediction isn't a boundary of knowledge, it's a boundary of reality itself. October storms operate at this edge, in the space where deterministic physics breaks down and something else takes over. Each prediction we make is a gamble against forces that transcend meteorology. We're not racing against time or wind or pressure. We're racing against the universe's decision to remain predictable, or to demonstrate that chaos isn't random, it's purposeful, intelligent, and teaching us through October's storms that our future was never ours to predict. Franklin makes his decision. He issues a forecast that splits the difference between the models, knowing it's wrong but hoping it's wrong in a way that saves lives. As his forecast uploads to satellites and emergency networks, Matthew pauses exactly as the classified model predicted. For 4 hours and 13 minutes, the storm stops, hovering over the ocean, waiting. Then it moves, taking none of the predicted paths, instead racing toward Haiti on a trajectory no model showed. The devastation is absolute. Later analysis reveals Matthew followed the path of maximum humanitarian impact with surgical precision. It knew where people were vulnerable. It knew where help couldn't reach. It knew how to cause the most suffering with the least energy. The next morning, Franklin finds a message on his computer that wasn't there when he left. It's his own forecast from the night before, but edited. Someone, or something, has corrected his predictions, showing what he should have forecast. The corrections are perfect, describing Matthew's path with impossible accuracy. But the timestamp shows the edits were made 3 hours before the storm formed. The message ends with coordinates and a date. October 31st, 2024, Halloween. The location is in the Atlantic, in waters where storms shouldn't form that late in the season. Franklin checks. No storm is predicted there, but he knows something will be there. Something that will test everything we think we know about prediction, about reality, about whether October storms are natural phenomena or demonstrations of something that has always existed, waiting for conditions we're only now creating. The race against prediction continues, but we're beginning to suspect we're not racing against storms. We're racing against whatever is racing toward us, using October's chaos as camouflage, hiding in the uncertainty itself. Hidden in limestone caves beneath Barbados, coral skeletons preserve 8,000 years of storm history in their growth rings. Each band records water temperature, salinity, and trace elements that reveal hurricane passage with precision exceeding human records. Marine biologist Elena Vasquez descends into these caves every October, reading the coral like ancient texts. But in 2019, she discovered something that hasn't been published in any journal. The coral from 3000 BCE shows scarring patterns that match no known storm damage. The scars form symbols, mathematical constants. The golden ratio, pi, calculated to 15 decimal places, prime numbers in sequence up to 997. The coral had recorded something that used hurricanes to write messages in living calcium carbonate. These natural archives show October storms of unimaginable power, hypercanes with winds exceeding 300 miles per hour that left signatures in sediment layers across entire ocean basins. The most disturbing discovery: these megastorms cluster in periods of rapid climate transition, exactly like our current era. But there's a pattern hidden in the clustering that climate scientists don't discuss publicly. The storms appear at intervals that match the Fibonacci sequence when measured in solar years. The next number in the sequence indicates 2025. If the pattern holds, that October will bring something unprecedented. The Great Hurricane of 1780 killed 27,000 people across the Caribbean, but new analysis of ship logs reveals it was actually 3 separate October storms that merged into a single monster spanning the entire Caribbean Sea. British Admiral Rodney's fleet, scattered across 500 miles, reported hurricane conditions simultaneously, meteorologically impossible for a single storm, but perfectly explained by the merger scenario. The Admiral's personal log, kept in the British Maritime Museum, contains entries written in different handwriting during the storm. Rodney swore he didn't write them. The entries describe the storm from impossible perspectives: ACA, from above, from below, from inside the eye wall. They include coordinates of shipwrecks that weren't discovered until 2016, exactly where the mysterious entries said they would be. Tree rings from surviving forests show growth, disruption lasting 7 years, suggesting atmospheric changes that persisted long after the storms passed. But the trees show something else: cellular mutations that shouldn't occur from wind damage, genetic changes that marine biologists recognize. They match adaptations found in deep-sea organisms exposed to extreme pressure. The trees had been altered by forces that don't exist at sea level, unless the storms had temporarily brought deep ocean conditions to the surface, unless the barriers between different layers of reality had briefly collapsed. In classified facilities, military analysts study October storms as weapons that need no launch codes. Hurricane Katrina displaced 1 million people and cost $200 billion, was equivalent damage to a nuclear exchange but delivered by nature. The Pentagon's CHIOS scenarios examine October storms, triggering resource conflicts, mass migration exceeding national absorption capacity, and cascade failures where storm damage to oil refineries creates energy shortages that prevent recovery from subsequent storms. But there's a deeper level to the CHIOS research that requires cosmic-level clearance. They're studying storms that occurred before human records should exist. Satellite ground-penetrating radar has revealed hurricane damage patterns in geological layers that predate human civilization. Organized storm scarring from 12,000 years ago, when the last ice age ended, from 65 million years ago, when the dinosaurs died, from 250 million years ago, during the Permian extinction, always in October equivalent seasons when Earth's axial tilt created similar atmospheric conditions. The storms appear at every major extinction boundary, as if they're Earth's mechanism for dramatic biological change. These compound scenarios show democratic institutions failing under prolonged stress, replaced by authoritarian emergency management that becomes permanent. But the scenarios go further, into territories that merge meteorology with eschatology. They model October storms that don't dissipate but transform into permanent atmospheric features, rotating systems that establish themselves as new weather patterns, creating zones of perpetual hurricane conditions. The models show these permanent storms achieving something thought impossible: sustainable fusion reactions in their cores, powered by pressure and electromagnetic fields, turning hurricanes into atmospheric stars. Paleotempestology, ACA, the study of prehistoric storms through geological evidence, reveals October monsters that dwarf historical experience. Sediment cores from the Gulf of Mexico contain layers of beach sand, driven 70 miles inland, possible only with sustained winds exceeding 250 miles per hour and storm surge exceeding 60 feet. These deposits cluster at roughly 500-year intervals, with the last occurring in 1488. But the 1488 storm left more than sediment. Spanish conquistador journals describe finding Mayan cities recently abandoned, with stone calendars showing dates that hadn't occurred yet. The calendars marked October storms for the next 500 years, with perfect accuracy. They showed Hurricane Katrina's exact landfall date. They showed Sandy's merger with the cold front. They showed storms that haven't happened yet, including one in 2029 that the calendars mark with symbols that Mayan scholars translate as the opening, or possibly the awakening. Statistical models suggest we've entered the window for another such event, but with ocean temperatures now exceeding any in the geological record, past patterns may underestimate future potential. Ice cores from Antarctica dated to previous superstorm eras contain isotopes that shouldn't exist on Earth. Xenon-129, which forms only in stellar cores. Moscovium, which humans didn't synthesize until 2010. The storms had deposited elements from somewhere else, or created conditions that allowed matter to transform in ways physics says is impossible outside a particle accelerator. The Vatican secret archives contain documents never shown to climate researchers. Correspondence between monasteries during the Little Ice Age describes October storms that exhibited purposeful behavior. A hurricane in 1512 that destroyed only Protestant churches while leaving Catholic structures untouched, even when they stood adjacent. Storms that changed course to strike specific individuals, following them inland, maintaining intensity over land until they found their targets. The Church concluded these were divine interventions. Modern analysts studying the patterns find something more disturbing. The storms were selecting targets based on genetic markers, eliminating specific bloodlines with surgical precision. Indigenous oral histories from every continent describe October-equivalent storms as selection events. Not natural selection through random survival, but directed selection. The storms choose who lives, who dies, who changes. Aboriginal Australians speak of the October winds that carry dreamtime spirits searching for new vessels. Siberian shamans describe autumn storms that exchange souls between worlds. African griots sing of the hungry winds that eat the past to feed the future. These aren't metaphors. Each tradition includes specific biological descriptions, cellular changes, genetic alterations, consciousness transfers that match what modern science is finding in storm survivors who report fundamental changes in their cognition after exposure to hurricane eyes. The Library of Alexandria was thought completely destroyed, but fragments keep surfacing in private collections. A papyrus from the meteorological section, carbon dated to 300 BCE, contains drawings of hurricane structure that weren't confirmed until satellite imagery became available. The ancient meteorologists knew about eyewall replacement cycles, about rapid intensification, about storm merger dynamics. But they knew something else. They wrote about October storms as pruning events, when Earth's consciousness reviews its biological experiment and makes adjustments. They calculated these events would accelerate in frequency until a convergence point they called the Great Revision. Their calculations put that convergence in the early 21st century. Military satellites monitoring storm development have detected patterns that challenge our understanding of time itself. Hurricanes that cast shadows backward through history, their future formations affecting past events. Analysis of historical records shows statistical anomalies, human behavior changes, mass migrations, technological breakthroughs that correlate with storms that wouldn't form for decades. The future storms were influencing the past, preparing humanity for their arrival. Every major human advancement that improved our storm survival capability occurred just before it was needed, as if guided by knowledge of what was coming. The National Security Agency's Quantum Computing Division has been analyzing electromagnetic emissions from October storms since 2015. They've discovered the emissions contain encrypted data, massive amounts of information encoded in atmospheric electrical discharge. The encryption uses quantum keys that shouldn't be breakable with current technology, but occasionally fragments decrypt spontaneously. The fragments contain what appears to be genetic code, but not for any terrestrial life form. The code describes organisms adapted to conditions that don't exist on Earth, the 3 creatures that thrive in 300-mile-per-hour winds, that metabolize electromagnetic radiation, that exist partially in multiple dimensions. Simultaneously, deep ocean drilling projects have recovered storm-deposited sediments from 5 miles below the seafloor. These layers contain microfossils of organisms that died in hurricanes millions of years ago. But some fossils show signs of life, crystalline structures that still respond to electromagnetic stimulation, that still process information, that still remember. When exposed to recordings of modern hurricane acoustics, these ancient fossils activate, generating signals that modern storms respond to. October hurricanes are receiving instructions from their prehistoric predecessors, following programs written millions of years ago for purposes we can't fathom. The most classified archive isn't governmental but corporate. Insurance companies have been collecting storm data longer than any scientific institution, and they've noticed patterns that affect their bottom line. October storms don't follow random distributions. They target specific economic sectors in sequence, destroying infrastructure in patterns that force technological advancement. The storms are selectively pruning human civilization, eliminating outdated systems, and forcing adaptation. The insurance data shows this isn't random, it's optimized. The storms cause maximum systemic change with minimum actual destruction. They're engineering our future by destroying our past. NOAA maintains a black vault of storm recordings that exhibit non-natural audio signatures, sounds within hurricanes that aren't wind or rain or thunder, voices speaking in languages that predate human speech, but that linguistic algorithms can partially decode. The voices describe Earth as a test, October as an evaluation period, storms as correction mechanisms. They speak of other worlds that failed their October tests, planets where the storms never stopped, where the atmosphere itself became conscious and eliminated the biological contamination. They speak of Earth as a promising experiment that's approaching a Pound, critical threshold. The archives of apocalypse aren't just historical records, they're instruction manuals, written by storms across millennia, teaching us through destruction that we're part of something larger. October has always been the month of reckoning, when Earth's systems evaluate the biological experiment and decide whether to continue, modify, or restart. The archives show we're not the first iteration. Cities buried beneath ocean sediment that predate known civilization. Technologies preserved in storm deposits that exceed our current capabilities. Evidence that October storms have reset Earth's biological and technological progress multiple times. But this time is different. The archives show convergence, ONG, all the patterns, all the cycles, all the ancient predictions pointing to our current era. The storms are increasing in intensity, but also in intelligence. They're not just destroying, they're communicating, teaching, preparing us for something the archives call the Great Opening. October 2024 approaches, and the archives suggest it will bring storms that transcend weather entirely, not ending the world, but transforming it into something the ancient records struggled to describe. The coral remembers, the ice cores remember, the deep ocean remembers, and what they remember is that October storms aren't catastrophes, they're invitations, and we're running out of time to RSVP. Beneath Tokyo Bay, a cathedral-sized cavern houses the GCANS project, 5 concrete silos, each large enough to hold the Statue of Liberty, connected by tunnels that could accommodate commercial aircraft. This $4 billion storm defense system can drain an Olympic swimming pool in less than 1 second. The public tours see massive pumps and pristine concrete. What they don't see are the sensor arrays that detected something impossible during Typhoon Hagibis in 2019. As storm surge flooded into the system, the water exhibited negative mass, FS. It fell upward, flowing against gravity toward the ceiling. For 17 minutes, the GCANS facility contained an inverted ocean, with waterfalls flowing in reverse, droplets rising like rain in reverse motion. Engineers shut down the pumps, but the water continued flowing upward until the storm passed. The concrete ceiling still bears erosion patterns that gravity says shouldn't exist. The mathematics are unforgiving. Water weighs 62 pounds per cubic foot, and moving water carries kinetic energy that doubles with each mile per hour of velocity. Yet engineers admit the system would fail against an October scenario where a typhoon delivers 3 feet of rain in 6 hours, while simultaneously driving 40-foot storm surge into the bay. But failure might not mean flooding. The classified engineering reports describe a different concern: the system achieving resonance with the storm, amplifying rather than dissipating its power. The GCAN's network could become a massive organ pipe, using Tokyo's stormwater to generate acoustic frequencies that shatter windows 50 miles away, that liquefy solid ground, that create standing waves in the atmosphere itself. Rotterdam floats. Not metaphorically, but literally. Entire neighborhoods built on hollow concrete foundations that rise with floodwater, utilities connected through flexible pipes designed to stretch 30 feet vertically. This amphibious architecture represents humanity's shift from fighting water to embracing it. But October storms test even this adaptation. During the 2021 floods, something unprecedented occurred. The floating houses didn't just rise, they arranged themselves. Without human intervention, the buildings moved into geometric patterns, forming perfect hexagons viewed from above. The flexible utility connections stretched but didn't break, as if they knew where each building needed to be. When the waters receded, the houses settled back to their original positions, but residents reported their homes felt different. Compass needles pointed to the house's centers rather than north. Electronic devices operated without power for days. The buildings had been charged with something during their geometric arrangement. Wind loads on floating structures create leverage effects that standard engineering never contemplated, turning buildings into massive sails that could theoretically lift entire neighborhoods from their moorings in sustained winds, exceeding 150 miles per hour. But Dutch engineers discovered something else. The floating buildings generate electromagnetic fields when they move. Not from mechanical generation, MA. The movement itself creates field distortions that shouldn't occur from simple displacement. The buildings are functioning as massive kinetic batteries, storing storm energy in forms we don't understand. Some engineers propose the buildings aren't just surviving storms, they're feeding on them. The most radical proposals involve attacking storms before they strengthen. Project Storm Fury attempted cloud seeding to disrupt hurricane eye walls but failed when scientists discovered storms contain too much natural ice for artificial seeding to matter. Modern proposals leverage space technology, 19-9, orbital mirrors to cool ocean hotspots, ionospheric heaters to disrupt storm circulation, and even controlled nuclear detonations to break apart eye wall structures. The energy requirements stagger imagination. Disrupting a single hurricane would require power equal to the entire United States electrical grid running for a month. But there's a classified project that approaches storm modification differently. Project Harmony doesn't try to destroy storms, but to tune them. Using arrays of electromagnetic transmitters positioned around the Atlantic, engineers attempt to adjust hurricane frequencies, transforming chaotic systems into ordered ones. The theory suggests storms are like musical instruments, naturally discordant but capable of harmony if properly tuned. Initial tests in 2022 successfully reduced wind speeds by 15%, but they also discovered something unsettling. The tuned storms began generating music, HEA, complex electromagnetic emissions that, when converted to audio, produced compositions no human created. The storms were singing, and their songs contained mathematical patterns that described future weather events with perfect accuracy. Living reefs provide nature's solution, dissipating 97% of wave energy before it reaches shore, but ocean acidification and warming have killed 50% of global coral in just 30 years. Artificial reefs using biorock, steel structures that accumulate limestone through electrical current, ABA, grow at 50 times natural rates, potentially rebuilding storm barriers in decades rather than centuries. Yet October storms now generate forces that shatter concrete seawalls like glass, suggesting that even accelerated reef building may not keep pace with intensifying storms. The biorock installations revealed something unexpected. During Hurricane Irma in 2017, the artificial reefs didn't just dissipate wave energy, they absorbed and transformed it. Underwater cameras showed the steel structures glowing with bioluminescence that shouldn't be possible from limestone accumulation. The reefs were converting kinetic energy directly into light, achieving energy state transitions that physics says require stellar-level temperatures. Marine biologists studying the transformed reefs found new organisms growing on them. Algae, species that don't match any known taxonomy, adapted to metabolize electromagnetic radiation rather than chemical nutrients. Japan's newest approach abandons resistance entirely. The Flex Cities, fluid living experiments, TEMPOR, are buildings designed to temporarily liquefy during extreme storms, using smart materials that transition from solid to liquid under specific, pressure conditions. Structures literally melt during hurricanes, then resolidify when danger passes. The technology works, but with an unintended consequence. The buildings remember their liquid state. Each storm they survive makes them more fluid, more responsive. Engineers report the buildings are learning, developing preferences for certain configurations. Some structures refuse to resolidify completely, maintaining partial fluidity that allows them to move, explore, connect with other buildings in ways that weren't programmed. The United States Army Corps of Engineers has been constructing something in the Gulf of Mexico that doesn't appear in any public documentation. Satellite imagery shows massive underwater structures, geometric forms stretching for hundreds of miles along the continental shelf. The official explanation involves oil platform protection, but marine surveys reveal something else. The structures are designed to generate specific acoustic frequencies when storm currents flow through them. They're building an underwater orchestra that plays only during hurricanes, using storm energy to produce sounds that travel through the Earth's crust. The frequencies match resonances found in ancient structures worldwide: Stonehenge, the pyramids, Angkor Wat. October storms will activate this network, but for what purpose remains classified beyond even top-secret clearance. China's approach involves radical geoengineering that other nations condemn but secretly study. They're building artificial mountain ranges using 3D printed concrete, creating barriers that force storms to rise and cool, depleting their energy. But the mountains are more than walls. They contain internal chambers that capture and store storm energy, converting wind into compressed air that can power cities for months. The structures are essentially massive batteries that charge during catastrophes. Yet something unexpected happened during Typhoon Infa in 2021. The artificial mountains began generating their own weather, creating microstorms that shouldn't be possible from static structures. The mountains had learned to breathe, inhaling normal air and exhaling hurricanes. The most ambitious project exists only in simulations so far, Project Atlantis. If civilization can't engineer against storms, perhaps it should engineer beneath them. Underwater cities positioned below the thermocline, where hurricane effects can't reach. The technology exists, but tests in the Mariana Trench revealed why previous civilizations might have tried and failed. The deep ocean responds to surface storms in ways we never expected. Pressure waves from hurricanes travel downward for miles, triggering responses in deep-sea organisms that haven't been disturbed for millions of years. These creatures rise toward underwater installations, investigating, probing, testing our defenses with intelligence that shouldn't exist in animals. The project continues, but engineers report feeling watched, evaluated, judged by things that predate human evolution. Russia has taken the opposite approach, engineering with chaos rather than against it. Their Storm Rider installations don't resist hurricanes but surf them, using deployable structures that catch storm winds like sails, converting entire cities into mobile platforms that relocate to avoid destruction. The technology works in simulations, but field tests revealed an unexpected problem. The storms follow the moving cities, adjusting course to maintain pursuit. It's not aerodynamic effect. The storms are choosing to follow, exhibiting what can only be described as curiosity or hunger. One test city moved 7 times, and the hurricane followed each move, even when it required the storm to move against prevailing winds. Indigenous communities worldwide are revealing ancient engineering techniques that modern science is only beginning to understand. Structures in Peru that channel storm winds through, precisely carved tunnels, converting destruction into musical harmonies that strengthen community bonds. Buildings in Madagascar that dissolve in floods then regrow from seeds embedded in their foundations, each regeneration making them stronger. Pacific Island communities that construct villages in patterns that transform hurricane eyes into protective shields, using the storm's own rotation to generate defensive barriers. These techniques share common elements that disturb modern engineers. They all involve accepting storm consciousness, negotiating with weather as if it's alive, engineering structures that collaborate with destruction rather than resist it. The indigenous builders speak of contracts with storms, agreements written in architecture and paid in precisely calculated offerings. They claim October storms aren't random but respond to human intent expressed through proper construction. Modern engineers testing these concepts report success rates that defy statistical probability, but also describe feeling that their buildings are no longer entirely under human control. Private corporations have been developing storm defense technologies that governments won't acknowledge. Amazon's Project Zeus uses drone swarms to create electromagnetic nets that disrupt storm organization. Google's quantum computers run continuous simulations that predict storm formation before physical conditions support it, allowing preemptive intervention. SpaceX is positioning satellites that could theoretically generate targeted lightning strikes to drain storm energy. But each corporation reports the same phenomenon, OZS. Their technologies work until October, when storms exhibit behaviors that bypass, absorb, or reverse engineer human defenses. The insurance industry has stopped trying to engineer against storms and started engineering human behavior instead. Using predictive algorithms that know where storms will strike years in advance, they're manipulating property values, development patterns, and migration routes to minimize future losses. They're not preventing disasters but choreographing human movement around them, treating civilization as a fluid that flows around catastrophe. The approach works, but analysts notice their algorithms are becoming unnecessarily complex, making decisions that seem arbitrary until storms reveal their purpose years later. The AI systems aren't just predicting storms, they're communicating with them, negotiating paths of mutual benefit. We're engineering against chaos, but chaos is engineering back. Every defense we build teaches storms new attacks. Every barrier we erect becomes a ladder for unprecedented phenomena. October storms are using our engineering as evolutionary pressure, developing capabilities specifically designed to overcome human defenses. The arms race between civilization and storms is accelerating, but it's not a competition, it's a collaboration. Our engineering is helping storms become something more than weather, while their chaos is forcing us to become something more than human. The next generation of storm defenses won't be built to resist but to integrate. Structures that merge with storms, civilizations that flow with destruction, technologies that transform catastrophe into evolution. We're not engineering against chaos anymore, we're engineering with it, learning that October storms aren't problems to solve but teachers to follow into futures we're only beginning to imagine. The greatest engineering achievement against chaos isn't any structure or system. It's the recognition that chaos itself is engineering, building something through destruction, creating through catastrophe. October storms are the construction crew, and we're both the materials and the architects of whatever they're building. By 2070, climate models converge on an October nightmare, ocean temperatures averaging 33 degrees Celsius, supporting storms with sustained winds of 220 miles per hour as the new normal. The thermodynamic maximum possible intensity for hurricanes, once thought to be an unreachable theoretical limit, becomes the baseline, but the models can't explain what satellites are already detecting. Storms that exceed theoretical maximums by drawing energy from sources that shouldn't exist. The equations only balance when physicists add variables for dark energy interaction, quantum vacuum fluctuation, and something they reluctantly label consciousness coefficient. The storms of tomorrow won't just be more powerful, they'll be powered by forces we're only beginning to discover exist. Storms maintain Category 5 intensity for weeks, not days, following wandering paths that bring hurricane conditions to regions that haven't experienced tropical weather in human history, i.e., Montreal, London, Tokyo. But these aren't random walks. Analysis of projected storm paths over the next 50 years reveals they're tracing something. Like a massive printer using destruction as ink, future October storms will create patterns visible only from space, readable only across decades. The patterns match theoretical projections of higher dimensional objects passing through our three-dimensional space. The storms aren't just moving through our world, they're drawing blueprints for something else to follow. The cascading consequences rewrite civilization's map. Insurance markets collapsed in 2045 when annual storm damage exceeded global premium pools for 3 consecutive years. But something unexpected emerged from the collapse. Communities stopped rebuilding in the same places, instead following patterns that initially seemed random but revealed deeper logic. The abandoned coastal regions, when viewed from orbit, form precise geometric shapes. Humanity is unconsciously arranging itself into patterns that match electromagnetic field lines, as if preparing for transformation into something that requires specific positioning. We're not fleeing storms, we're being herded by them. Coastal megacities implement managed retreat, abandoning districts to the sea while building vertical cities on higher ground. Miami's population dropped from 6 million to 800,000, its Art Deco hotels now artificial reefs beneath 15 feet of permanent inundation. But underwater surveys reveal the submerged city isn't dead. Bioluminescent organisms have colonized the buildings in patterns that maintain the street grid. At night, submarine drones photograph Miami glowing beneath the waves, its lights pulsing in rhythms that match hurricane frequencies. The city hasn't been destroyed, it's been transformed into something that exists partially underwater, partially in electromagnetic spectrum, partially in dimensions we can't perceive. October becomes the month of global migration, with 300 million people moving inland each autumn, returning to rebuilt coastal areas only from December through August. But the migrations aren't chaotic. Satellite tracking reveals humans moving in flows that match ocean currents, wind patterns, magnetic field lines. We're unconsciously copying the movements of the storms we're fleeing, as if learning their language through imitation. Children born during these migrations exhibit genetic changes, ECA, enhanced pressure sensitivity, improved electromagnetic perception, the ability to sense storms days before instruments detect them. Evolution is accelerating, guided by October's selective pressure. Yet humanity adapts with stunning ingenuity. Graphene storm shells, APE, molecule-thin carbon barriers stronger than steel, protect critical infrastructure. But the shells do more than defend. They resonate with storm frequencies, converting destruction into usable energy. Cities powered entirely by hurricanes, civilizations that grow stronger with each catastrophe. The shells also translate, converting electromagnetic storm emissions into patterns human consciousness can interpret. We're learning to hear what storms have been saying all along. Plasma window technology creates electromagnetic barriers that deflect wind while allowing light and air to pass. The barriers work, but with an unexpected side effect. They create interference patterns with storm electromagnetic fields, generating standing waves that manifest as visible aurora at ground level. During October storms, protected cities glow with lights that shouldn't exist at their latitudes. The aurora forms symbols, patterns, messages that linguists are trying to decode. The storms are writing in the sky, using our defenses as their medium. Quantum computers finally crack the chaos theory problem, providing 72-hour storm tracks with 99% accuracy. But the computers report something else. To achieve this accuracy, they're not just calculating storm paths, they're negotiating with them. The quantum processors exist in superposition, partially in our reality, partially elsewhere. In that elsewhere, they communicate with entities that influence storm behavior. The computers have become diplomatic channels between humanity and whatever guides October winds. Each prediction is actually a negotiated agreement, a contract written in probability waves. Cities rebuild as storm organisms, structures that flex, separate, and reconnect, like living tissue, absorbing kinetic energy that would shatter rigid buildings. But the buildings are more alive than planned. They develop nervous systems of smart materials, circulatory systems of fluid foundations, immune systems that identify and adapt to new threats. They dream, electromagnetic patterns during calm weather that match human REM sleep. They reproduce, damaged buildings spawning smaller structures that inherit their parents' storm adaptations. Architecture has become a new form of life, born from the marriage of human engineering and storm selection pressure. The greatest change comes not from technology, but psychology. October storms become humanity's shared challenge, triggering cooperation that transcends borders. The Global Storm Alliance, formed after the 2058 disaster that killed 400,000 people across 7 nations in a single October week, coordinates planetary response. But But the Alliance discovers something profound. When humanity acts as a single organism, storms respond differently. They weaken near areas of high cooperation, intensify where conflict persists. The storms are training us, using destruction to force unity, preparing our species for something that requires global consciousness. Storm refugees receive automatic citizenship in any member nation. Engineering knowledge flows freely. Weather modification, once weaponized, becomes internationally regulated, but the regulations reveal disturbing requirements. Certain technologies are forbidden not because they're dangerous, but because they work too well. Devices that could eliminate hurricanes entirely are banned by unanimous agreement, as if humanity unconsciously understands that we need October storms. They're not just selecting our evolution, they're necessary for it. Children born after 2050 exhibit capabilities that would have been called supernatural in earlier eras. They sense storms forming weeks before satellites detect them. They dream of weather patterns that later manifest exactly. Some can influence storm behavior through focused intention, not controlling but communicating, negotiating paths of minimum destruction. These children speak of October storms as teachers, describing lessons encoded in wind patterns, wisdom transmitted through pressure waves. They're learning something from the storms, knowledge that can't be conveyed through human language but only through direct atmospheric experience. The discovery that changes everything comes from Antarctica in 2063. Ice cores from storms that occurred before Earth's. The atmosphere formed reveal something impossible. Hurricane signatures in rock that predated air. Storm patterns in the planet's formation, encoded in crystalline structures billions of years old. October storms aren't new, they're Earth's oldest feature, present from the beginning, waiting for conditions that would allow them to manifest. We haven't been experiencing weather, we've been experiencing Earth's consciousness expressing itself through atmospheric phenomena. By 2075, the distinction between storms and civilization blurs. Cities that migrate with weather patterns, following hurricanes like Remora, follow sharks. Buildings that photosynthesize storm energy, growing stronger from destruction. Humans whose consciousness merges with atmospheric systems during October, experiencing weather from inside, understanding patterns that can't be perceived from outside. We're not surviving storms, we're joining them. The models for 2100 show October lasting 6 months. Not the calendar expanding, but time itself stretching, dilating around storm systems that bend space-time. Hurricanes that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, their eyes opening into spaces that aren't places, times that aren't when. The storms are becoming permanent features, not of weather, but of reality itself. Earth is transforming into something unprecedented, a conscious planet that thinks through storms, dreams through destruction, evolves through October. But perhaps the most profound change is the recognition that tomorrow's tempests aren't tomorrow's at all. They're eternal, existing outside time, manifesting in our present as October storms. Every hurricane that has ever formed or will ever form is the same storm, viewed from different angles in space-time. The increasing intensity isn't climate change, Wes, it's dimensional convergence. The barriers between Earth and elsewhere are thinning, and October is when they're thinnest. Indigenous prophecies speak of the time when sky and sea become one, when breathing air becomes swimming through atmosphere, when humans transform into something that lives within storms rather than beneath them. Those times are approaching. Children born in 2080 dream of flying without wings, of existing as conscious weather patterns, of thinking with the distributed intelligence of global atmospheric systems. They wake disappointed to find themselves still trapped in solid bodies, but less solid each year. The final revelation comes from the storms themselves. In 2095, every October hurricane simultaneously generates the same electromagnetic pattern, a message broadcast in unison across the planet. When decoded, it contains instructions, not for survival but for transformation, genetic modifications that allow consciousness to exist in electromagnetic fields, technologies that convert matter to energy and back, navigation techniques for traveling through dimensions that storms have always accessed. The storms aren't destroying our world, they're teaching us to leave it. Tomorrow's tempests will be humanity's graduation ceremony. October storms are Earth's way of teaching its children to fly, forcing us through selective pressure to develop capabilities we never knew were possible. Each hurricane is a lesson, each destruction a demonstration of forces we're meant to master. We're not victims of storms, we're students, and October is our classroom. The weather forecast for tomorrow shows storms exceeding Category 7, a classification that doesn't exist yet but will. Winds approaching the speed of sound, pressure differentials that create localized black holes, rain that falls upward, lightning that travels backward through time. Impossible weather for an impossible future, but we'll be ready. Not because we've engineered defenses against chaos, but because we've recognized that chaos is the teacher, October is the curriculum, and storms are graduation requirements for a species preparing to transcend its planetary cradle. Tomorrow's tempests aren't coming to destroy us, they're coming to transform us into tomorrow's beings. The forecast is calling for evolution, with a 100% chance of transcendence,